phone buzzed with a notification from the family group chat. It was one of those messages you read twice, then 3 times, just to make sure your eyes aren't playing tricks on you. "We've sold Grandpa's house," it read in bold, unapologetic letters. My stomach dropped like I'd been shoved off a cliff. That house wasn't just 4 walls and a roof, it was mine. Or at least, that's what everyone had led me to believe for years. Grandpa had promised it to me before he passed, his voice trembling but resolute as he said, "This place will always be yours, kid.
Keep it alive. And now, gone. Sold."
Without so much as a heads up. When I confronted them later that evening, my parents sitting stiffly on the couch while my brother leaned against the wall with this smug look plastered across his face, they didn't even flinch. They acted like they were doing me some kind of favor. "You're not really part of the family," Mom said, her tone cold enough to freeze fire. "It was always meant for your brother." Her words hit harder than any slap ever could. I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving behind an emptiness that clawed at my chest. Dad chimed in next, trying to soften the blow with logic that sounded more like betrayal. "Your brother needs this to fund his business. He has dreams, plans. You'll figure something out." His voice trailed off, but the implication hung heavy in the air. I wasn't worth investing in. Not like him. Never like him. The worst part? The way they looked at me, not with guilt or regret, but with this strange mix of pity and dismissal, like I was a problem they'd finally solved. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to tear apart their excuses until nothing remained but the ugly truth. But instead, I just stood there, frozen, my fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. My silence must have unnerved them because Dad shifted uncomfortably and Mom avoided meeting my eyes altogether. Only my brother held my gaze, his smirk widening as if daring me to challenge him. And then, somehow, through the haze of anger and hurt, I found myself smiling. It wasn't a happy smile, or even a sarcastic one. It was sharp, cutting, almost feral. I turned without another word and walked away, letting the door slam shut behind me. 2 days later, when my lawyer arrived at their doorstep holding documents that would change everything, I knew exactly how it would feel to watch their faces turn pale. Because sometimes, justice doesn't come wrapped in forgiveness. It comes wrapped in fine print. 2 days later, I sat in the back seat of my lawyer's car as we pulled up to the house where I'd spent countless summers chasing fireflies under Grandpa's watchful eye. The familiar creak of the front gate sent a shiver down my spine, but this time, it wasn't nostalgia, it was anticipation. My lawyer, Sarah, glanced at me through the rearview mirror, her expression calm, yet calculating. She had warned me about what might happen today, but I wasn't nervous. No, I was ready. As we stepped inside, the tension was palpable. My parents sat rigidly on the couch, their faces masks of forced composure, while my brother paced nervously near the fireplace. When Sarah cleared her throat, all eyes snapped toward us. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice steady and authoritative. "I'm here to discuss the legal implications surrounding the recent sale of Mr. Your last name, S. estate." My mother's hands trembled slightly as she clutched a tissue, and my father's jaw tightened. My brother stopped pacing, his usual bravado faltering as he crossed his arms defensively. Sarah wasted no time getting to the point. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers, placing them on the coffee table with deliberate precision. "Before proceeding further, let's clarify ownership rights," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. She flipped open the first document, revealing Grandpa's original will. "According to this legally binding agreement, the property was explicitly left to your name, with specific conditions regarding its transferability." Her finger traced over the fine print at the bottom of the page. "Notice anything unusual here?" she asked, sliding the paper toward them. For a moment, there was only silence. Then my father leaned forward, squinting at the text. His face paled as realization dawned. "What does this mean?" he stammered, his voice cracking under the weight of what he was reading. Sarah didn't mince words. "It means the sale is invalid unless your name consents to it. Furthermore, any attempt to override these terms constitutes breach of contract, and trust me, The penalties for that are severe." My mother gasped audibly, clutching the armrest like it might anchor her to reality. My brother, however, exploded. "This can't be right," he shouted, snatching the document and scanning it frantically. "There's no way Grandpa would do this." "Oh, but he did," Sarah replied coolly, producing another set of papers. "These are copies of correspondence between your grandfather and his attorney confirming his intentions. Every detail aligns with the will. Shall I summarize?" By now, my family looked like deer caught in headlights. My mother buried her face in her hands, muttering apologies I couldn't hear over the pounding in my ears. My father stared blankly ahead, his shoulders slumped in defeat. And my brother? He sank onto the couch, defeated, his earlier arrogance replaced by raw panic. Sarah continued, her voice slicing through the chaos. "Additionally, due to the unauthorized transaction, the buyer has already initiated legal action against your family for misrepresentation. If your name chooses not to intervene, this could escalate significantly." That's when my mother broke down completely. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she reached for my hand. "Please, sweetheart, forgive us," she pleaded, her voice shaking. "We didn't know, we thought." I cut her off gently, but firmly. "You should have known," I said, my voice low but steady.
"You should have cared enough to check."
"Instead, you treated me like I didn't matter." The room fell silent again, save for my mother's quiet sobs. For the first time in years, I saw vulnerability in their eyes, not just fear, but shame. And though every fiber of my being screamed for retribution, something deeper stirred within me. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the faint glimmer of hope that perhaps, just maybe, they weren't beyond redemption. "Let's take a step back," I said finally, standing up. "We need to talk about how to fix this for all of us." The days following that confrontation were a blur of emotions, each one pulling me in different directions. On one hand, I felt vindicated, finally. After years of being sidelined, dismissed, and erased, the truth had surfaced. But on the other hand, the sheer weight of what had happened pressed down on me like a storm cloud refusing to break. My family's betrayal wasn't just about money or property. It was about trust, love, and belonging, or the lack thereof. Every glance at my parents' guilt-ridden faces or my brother's simmering resentment reminded me of how deeply fractured we had become. And yet, somewhere beneath the anger and hurt, a small, stubborn part of me refused to give up entirely. I started spending more time alone, retreating to places that brought me solace. A quiet park bench overlooking the river, the cozy corner of a coffee shop where sunlight streamed through the windows, or even the old attic in my apartment building, where dust motes danced lazily in the golden afternoon light. In those moments of solitude, I allowed myself to confront the pain head-on. Why did their actions cut so deeply? Was it because they chose my brother over me, or was it because they never truly believed I deserved anything at all? One evening, as I sat by the river watching the water ripple under the moonlight, memories flooded back unbidden. I thought of Grandpa teaching me how to fish, his calloused hands guiding mine as we cast lines into the lake behind his house. I remembered the stories he told me about resilience, about fighting for what mattered most. "Life isn't fair," he used to say, his voice gravelly but warm. "But fairness doesn't mean letting others walk all over you. Sometimes it means knowing when to stand firm and when to let go." Those words echoed in my mind now, forcing me to pause and reflect. Had I been standing firm enough? Or was I clinging to bitterness instead of seeking resolution? The turning point came during a late-night conversation with Sarah, who had become not just my lawyer, but also an unexpected confidant. Over cups of herbal tea in her minimalist office, she listened patiently as I poured out my frustrations. "You have every right to hold them accountable," she said gently. "But ask yourself, what do you want to gain from this? Justice? Revenge? Closure?" Her questions lingered long after our meeting ended, gnawing at the edges of my resolve. It wasn't easy, but slowly I began to see things differently. My family's betrayal hadn't just hurt me, it had revealed cracks in their own foundations. Their desperation to support my brother's business stemmed from fear, not malice. fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of losing control. And while none of that excused their actions, it helped me understand why they had acted the way they did. Still, understanding wasn't the same as forgiving. Forgiveness felt impossible, like trying to climb a mountain without footholds. Yet, deep down, I knew I couldn't move forward without it. So I made a decision not to absolve them outright, but to extend a lifeline, to offer them a chance to rebuild what they had broken, piece by fragile piece. The next morning, I called a family meeting. As we gathered around the kitchen table, the same table where countless meals and arguments had unfolded, I took a deep breath and spoke from the heart. "I don't expect you to undo what's been done," I began, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. "But I need you to acknowledge it. Acknowledge that you betrayed me, that you treated me like I didn't matter. And I need you to show me that you're willing to change." Tears welled in my mother's eyes as she nodded silently, her hands clasped tightly together. My father looked away, his jaw working as if chewing on unspoken words. Even my brother, who had spent weeks avoiding eye contact, finally met my gaze. "I'm sorry," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "I didn't think." "You didn't," I interrupted softly. "None of you did. But maybe now you can start." In that moment, something shifted. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. A fragile, tentative step toward healing. And though the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, I realized that holding on to anger wouldn't bring me peace. Letting go, however painful, might. In the weeks that followed, I found myself navigating uncharted territory. The initial shock of betrayal had given way to a grueling process of rebuilding trust, a task far more complex than simply signing papers or issuing apologies. It required patience, vulnerability, and an uncomfortable willingness to confront truths neither side wanted to face. Yet, amidst the tension and awkward silences, there were glimmers of progress, small victories that hinted at the possibility of reconciliation. One of the first steps was setting boundaries. I insisted on transparency moving forward, demanding that any major decisions involving shared assets or responsibilities include me in discussions. At first, my parents bristled at the idea, their pride wounded by the implication that they couldn't be trusted. But when I calmly explained that it wasn't about mistrust, it was about restoring balance, they reluctantly agreed. We drafted a simple agreement outlining communication protocols and expectations, which Sarah helped formalize. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Then came the harder part, addressing the emotional scars. Family dinners became tense affairs, filled with stilted conversations and forced smiles. My brother, once quick to dismiss my feelings, now tiptoed around me like I might explode at any moment. One night, after an especially strained meal, I decided to break the ice. "Look," I said, pushing my plate aside, "this isn't working. We can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's clearly not." To my surprise, it was my father who responded first. "You're right," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "We messed up, and we're paying the price. But we're trying. Your name. Give us credit for that." His words struck a chord. For the first time, I saw genuine effort behind their actions, or at least the beginnings of it. That night, we stayed up late talking, airing grievances and sharing fears. My mother confessed how overwhelmed she'd felt juggling financial pressures while trying to support both her children. My brother admitted he'd resented me growing up, convinced I was the favorite despite evidence to the contrary. Hearing their perspectives didn't erase the pain, but it humanized them in ways I hadn't expected. Slowly, the dynamics began to shift. Small gestures replaced grand apologies. My mother started sending me thoughtful texts checking in on my day. My father invited me to join him on weekend errands, using the time to catch up without prying too deeply. Even my brother made an effort, offering to help me move furniture or lending a hand with projects I'd been putting off. These acts weren't monumental, but they signaled a desire to reconnect, however clumsily. Of course, setbacks happened. Old habits die hard, and there were moments when frustration bubbled over. During one particularly heated argument about finances, my brother accused me of holding the situation over their heads like a weapon. You act like you're better than us, he snapped, his face flushed with anger. For a split second, I considered lashing back, letting the bitterness I'd worked so hard to suppress boil over. But instead, I took a deep breath and said, maybe I am angry. Maybe I feel like you don't get it. But yelling won't fix anything. Let's figure this out together. The room fell silent. Then, to my astonishment, my brother nodded. Okay, he said quietly. Let's try. Moments like these, fragile, imperfect, but real, became stepping stones toward healing. They reminded me that forgiveness wasn't a destination. It was a journey, one marked by missteps and breakthroughs alike. And though the wounds were still raw, I began to sense a flicker of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. As the months passed, the changes within our family rippled outward, reshaping not only our relationships, but also the lives of those around us. My brother, once consumed by his ambition and blind to the consequences of his choices, began to mature in ways I hadn't anticipated. Freed from the suffocating pressure of proving himself through material success, he redirected his energy toward meaningful pursuits. He joined a local mentorship program for young entrepreneurs, sharing his experiences, both triumphs and failures, with aspiring business owners. Watching him speak passionately at community events, I realized he was finding purpose beyond profit. My parents, too, underwent transformations that surprised even themselves. My mother, who had always struggled with self-worth tied to her role as caregiver, rediscovered hobbies she'd abandoned years ago. She enrolled in painting classes and started volunteering at a senior center, where her warmth and creativity brought joy to residents. Meanwhile, my father embraced a newfound openness, attending therapy sessions to unpack decades of unresolved guilt and regret. Though it wasn't easy, there were days when his defenses flared up. He persisted, determined to heal old wounds rather than pass them down. For me, the journey was equally transformative. Letting go of bitterness didn't mean forgetting. Instead, it allowed me to reclaim parts of myself I'd lost along the way. I returned to writing, a passion I'd shelved during the chaos of the past year, pouring my emotions into essays and short stories that resonated with readers online. One piece, titled Fine Print, Lessons in Love and Loss, went viral, sparking conversations about family dynamics and forgiveness. Strangers reached out, sharing their own stories of betrayal and redemption, reminding me that pain, while deeply personal, is also universal. But perhaps the most profound impact was felt within our home. Slowly, tentatively, laughter returned to our gatherings. Dinners evolved from tense negotiations into lively debates about books, movies, and life itself. There were still moments of friction. Old patterns occasionally resurfaced, but we faced them differently now, with honesty rather than avoidance. One evening, as we sat around the living room playing board games, my brother turned to me with a sheepish grin. You know, he said, rolling the dice, if anyone had told me 6 months ago we'd be doing this, I wouldn't have believed them. Me neither, I admitted, smiling back. But here we are. Here we were indeed, broken, scarred, but whole in ways we hadn't been before. Our story wasn't perfect, nor was it finished. But it was ours, written in ink that bled authenticity and resilience. And as I looked around at the people who had once hurt me so deeply, I felt something unexpected bloom in my chest. Gratitude. Gratitude not for the pain, but for the growth it had sparked, for the reminder that, even in darkness, light can emerge if you're brave enough to seek it. Sitting here now, reflecting on everything that's transpired, I realize how much I've grown, not just as an individual, but as someone who understands the value of grace and perseverance. This journey hasn't been easy, and it certainly hasn't been linear, but it has taught me invaluable lessons about strength, vulnerability, and the power of forgiveness. What started as a tale of betrayal transformed into a narrative of redemption, proving that even the deepest wounds can heal with time and effort. If there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this. Life will throw challenges your way, some of which may feel insurmountable. But within those trials lies an opportunity to rise stronger, to mend what's broken, and to redefine what truly matters. Whether it's standing firm in your convictions or extending compassion to those who've wronged you, every choice shapes the person you're becoming. So, I leave you with a question. What will you choose? Will you let bitterness define you, or will you embrace the messy, beautiful process of healing? The path isn't always clear, and it certainly isn't free of obstacles, but I promise you this, it's worth it. Because in the end,